Good evening. On behalf of Hong Kong U Ophthalmology, I would like to extend our warmest welcome to all honorable guests here at the Lecture Theatre in Hong Kong U Met, and also to all friends and colleagues who are joining us this evening via teleconferencing. With apologies, because of the pandemic, we'll only be able to invite ophthalmologists from the Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospital, from Hong Kong West Cluster, and also our academic staff from Hong Kong U Ophthalmology. The Hong Kong U Ophthalmology Distinguished Lecture Series is a part of our mission to advance research in vision science, to strengthen the delivery of ophthalmic care in our community, and to amend the standard of ophthalmic education in Hong Kong. The quarterly lecture series features on 4 areas within and outside ophthalmology, including community ophthalmology, research advances, ophthalmic education, and beyond ophthalmology. We are truly delighted and honored this evening to have Professor Walton Li to deliver our inaugural lecture. Professor Li is a dear friend of Hong Kong U and Hong Kong U Ophthalmology, and I would like to invite Professor Lang Wei Kang, our Associate Dean in Research and Li Shufeng Medical Foundation Professor in Gastroenterology, to deliver a welcome speech. Professor Lang.
Professor Li, Professor Lang, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, both live here or on Zoom. Welcome to this first distinguished lecture series organized by the Department of Ophthalmology, Hong Kong U. I think as mentioned by Chris, so this is the inauguration of this quarterly lecture series that focus on the 4 themes he mentioned previously, including community ophthalmology, ophthalmic education, recent advances, and beyond ophthalmology. And as you know, each lecture will be given by an eminent speakers within and outside the field of ophthalmology and medicine. So today we are very honored to have Professor Walton Li, the visionary founding head of the Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospitals, Department of Ophthalmology, and the current Medical Superintendent, as our first distinguished lecture orators. He also served as Honorary Professor of Hong Kong U Department of Ophthalmology, and also the Hong Kong U Faculty of Medicine. So Professor Li received his Doctor of Medicine degree from UCLA in 1974, and then served as a resident at the VA hospitals in Los Angeles, and then underwent a fellowship in the cornea and external eye diseases at the Julius Stein Eye Institute of UCLA. And he obtained the Diplomate of American Board of Ophthalmology in 1974, and then returned to Hong Kong and established the Department of Ophthalmology at Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospitals. And under his leadership, the department has become the important pillar of ophthalmic care in Hong Kong, even today. And he has since carried his visionary work forward as the hospital chairman, board of directors, and medical superintendent. And as all of you know, Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospitals was recognized as one of the best hospitals in Hong Kong and even the Greater Bay Area. And to testify people's trust on the Hong Kong SH brand name, if you log into the Hong Kong COVID vaccine website and try to register for the COVID vaccine, you'll be surprised that while some centers have empty slots for the next 3 weeks, but the Hong Kong Sanatorium is fully booked for the next 3 weeks. So you can see how trustful this Hong Kong SH brand has built up over the years. Apart from clinical care and health administration, Professor Li has been the chairman of the Li Shufeng Medical Foundations, which is a staunch supporter of Hong Kong U medicine, including at least donations of 8 endowed professorships, including myself. This is my declaration of conflict of interest here. So he's also a member of the court of the university and a member of the second board of directors of the University of Hong Kong Shenzhen Hospitals. And he has received numerous honors, including honorary fellow of Hong Kong universities, Open University of Hong Kong and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. In 2014, he was conferred the degree of Doctor of Social Science honoris causa by the University of Hong Kong. So today we have the privilege of listening to the wisdom and also seeing through the eye of Professor Walton Li on this inaugural lectures of the Hong Kong U Ophthalmology Distinguished Lecture Series. So without further delay, Professor Li, please.
Good evening, fellow colleagues. Thank you, Professor W.K. Leung, for the kind introduction, and thank you, Professor Chris Leung, for inviting me to be this inaugural speaker for the Hong Kong U Ophthalmology series of lectures. And it's a great honor, and also to confer this professor title, but as my wife told me, this is an honorary professor, so in front of the real academic professors, I better just title it as Dr. Walton Li. Now look, well, in any case, we're looking, I'm not going to take you down the memory lane of development. I just like you to know that our college and our society has actually compiled a very comprehensive history of the development of ophthalmology in Hong Kong. So that's quite interesting. And we look at the, if you look at the development of ophthalmology in Hong Kong, you can see very clearly the dynamics of evolution. Our evolution pathway is always towards progress and improvement. So basically, the development is towards better patient care through incorporating of medical advances and technology to serve better clinical outcome, the development of infrastructure to provide better patient service for more patients, and also the development of the training program and education program to better train our next generation of doctors. So this is the main theme towards our evolution. Now, it would be interesting also to note, if you look at the timeline in our evolution, the rate of evolution, that you see in the beginning of the last century, or towards the end of the last century, Hong Kong's development had been lagging behind some other advanced countries. But the 1990s, with the development of the hospital authority, with the creation of the College of Ophthalmology, and this creation of the Chinese University Academic Department of Ophthalmology, within a very short time, I think we caught up on the world stage. So for the past few decades, okay, here's the website. You could check for the development. So we talk about the advances. The evolution pathway, it's towards better. And then we're looking at the rate of evolution. So we caught up with the world stage, and we have really enjoyed, the Hong Kong doctors have always, for the past few decades, have enjoyed our international standing. You know, we go all over the world. In China, they think we're the best doctors, better trained doctors. In Asia, we stand our ground. But is that going to be the same? The pandemic has put a stop to this world. But at the same time, the world has also changed. There's a new world order. So we remain in a special position as a pearl of the Orient, and our position is a special in China, in the Greater Bay Area, or will we be dimmed? Now, politically, people may not like us to thrive and flourish. What about the perception of doctors in Hong Kong? What about our international position? What can we do about it? Well, we can continue and carry on, or we can try to improve and do better. What can we do? So tonight, I'm just going to share with you some of how the dynamics of evolution can change. You know, the system is always resistant to change. So you have to move it. You have to overcome the resistance. And I'm going to show you some stories of people who try to make things happen, to try to make a difference, and maybe we can learn something from it. So the first person, well, this is our international status, not only for Hong Kong, and we'll talk about our role in the international stage and our role and position in China. So, case histories. Well, the first, of course, the person that affected me most is my late uncle, Dr. Li Shifan, the founder of the Hong Kong Sanatorium Hospital and the Li Shifan Medical Foundation. I'll tell you his history. He was born in Hong Kong, came from a poor village of Toi San. So as a young lad, he traveled to Boston to join his father doing business there. Along the way in Toi San, on one of the streets in Canada, doing window shopping, some of the local kids started throwing stones at him, and one knocked him out. So this is to let you know the current hate crime against Asian existed 100 years ago. So he was taken to hospital, sutured up, and went on to meet his father. He was quite amazed at how well the wound healed with no pain. He was touched by the kindness of some of the American people. So on his way back to Hong Kong, he had two revelations. Touched by the Christian kindness, he accepted Christianity, but he also felt his destiny was going to be how to learn Western medicine, what is good in the Western medicine, to bring it back to China to help the Chinese people, the people from his village. So his English was good enough for him to get into DBS in Hong Kong and entered the College of Medicine, the precursor of the Hong Kong U School of Medicine. And that was where he met Dr. Sun Yat-sen and got involved in the revolution. So he joined the Tongmenghui. And then during all this preparation, even though he was very much against the Manchu government, he did apply for the imperial scholarship to enable him to go to Edinburgh to get some training in tropical medicine. And before returning to Hong Kong, to China, when the revolution started. So the revolution gave birth to the new China as a nation. And because of his training, because of his relationship with Dr. Sun, he was appointed the first health minister. The first act as a minister was that now we are facing the COVID in Hong Kong, but at that time in Guangzhou, there was plague. So the act of the minister was to eradicate the rats, arrange for the disposal, daily disposal of the manures and refuge from the streets. And if you read from this book, you know, in Guangzhou, Guangdong, we don't have the Ganges River, but people still left dead bodies on the street that need to be collected. So while he was doing that, however, having a new China as a country doesn't mean the country was at peace. There were warlords and instability. So he went back to Hong Kong to take up his practice of medicine. And then he took the time to get further training at Edinburgh and return from his Edinburgh, get his FRCS degree, and return to serve as the Dean of the Gongyi Medical College in Canton. And that is, of course, a precursor of the Zhongshan Yuyuan that we have today. And of course, as a dean, he did what the dean was supposed to do, elevate the standard of his academic training to college to recognized medical school. He went all over the states from the fellow villagers settling in the states for donations, built a new wing and all that. But again, even after 10 years, the political instability was still around. The medical school was taken over and became nationalized later to become the Zhongshan Medical School. So he returned to Hong Kong and took up as the first medical superintendent of the Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospital, just established then. Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospital was the first private hospital in Hong Kong for all the Chinese doctors trained in Western medicine, because the public hospitals were run by expatriates and the government. And the first thing he did, therefore, was to establish the nursing school. That's how we started our tradition of the nursing school. But the curriculum oftentimes were given by lectures given by the doctors. So there was good working and teaching relationship between the doctors and nurses. And that's how this tradition of nursing service and of Hong Kong Sanatorium started. That's why we're still running the nursing school. And because he was in touch with what's happening around the world, brought in technologies. So this also become the tradition of the Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospital. At the end of his career, he wrote his autobiography, which was reprinted by Commercial Press in 2019 about his. Now it's interesting reading because according to the Hong Kong U History Department, his autobiography was the only first person account of the Japanese occupation in Hong Kong. Everything else was, hearsay or what's been told, but his was the only first personal account of his experience during the Second World War. But at the end of his, writing this book, in his preamble, he mentioned a few things. Number one is that his concept was that internationally, people, he even feels the Chinese people are a bit weak in health. 東亞病夫嘛. So he wanted to correct that. The Li Shifan Medical Foundation is not for profit, but to help the health of the people in practice, research, and for the breeding of the next generation talents. And this is Dr. Sun's lasting words, that the revolution is not finished. There's still work to be done. And that's just how he feels, that the international understanding between China and the West may be the key to world peace. I don't know whether this still stands, but that was what he had written. And so we had established a medical foundation, not for profit. We're financially independent, and we follow his wishes and his ideals. Now, that's his wish, is to leave the world a better place, a little richer than I found it. When I returned to Hong Kong in 1980, I did not have his high ideals. I just wanted to return and survive in my private practice. But however, what I learned in the US in coming back, I thought there were some advantages. Perhaps I could make a difference. I thought, well, we just started using operating microscope and microsurgery. I was trained in corneal transplantation. At the time, it was diabetic retinopathy and the use of argon laser. And I was interested in phacoemulsification. Well, how much of an impact? Now, in terms of corneal transplantation, it was not a very popular surgery in those days because all our donors came from Sri Lanka. And you have to wait for the donation. But there is a time limit between the death of the patient, the harvesting, packing it in a moist chamber, put it in ice, dry ice case, flying it to Hong Kong, meeting at the airport, transporting to the hospital, and you want to do it, the corneal transplant, within 48 hours as a sort of window. So it means, well, you have to do it in the middle of the night in order to get it done. So that's why I get a lot of referrals. You don't charge very much, you have a lot of work to do. Now, certainly, I could not imagine how you could do a corneal transplant without tenonylon suture, without the operating microscope. So that was certainly helpful. But I was doing surgery, nobody wanted to do very much. And I was quite surprised also, however, in cataract surgery, we used to do it under microscope, but even with loupes and with big sutures, they do pretty well by the local doctors. Not a big deal difference, because even though you may have some wound dehiscence or wound healing, the patients could still see quite well with aphakic glasses. So even if you do a very fine wound apposition, you still need those thick aphakic glasses. So not much of an impact. What about diabetic retinopathy? Well, because the doctors didn't have lasers, the patients don't know any better. It's very hard to convince a patient to let you zap them with a laser when they were seeing well. When they hemorrhaged, They can't see out, you can't see in, and you can't do laser anyway. So you have a machine, but it's very hard pressed to convince people to get treated with the laser. And in any case, the standard of care at the time is that the doctors don't have such a tight control of the blood sugar. You don't want patients to get hypoglycemic, incidents. And the Chinese patients don't want to go on diet anyway. So not much of an impact because of the peer standard at the time and the public education, the public knowledge at the time. Phaco emulsification, well, I couldn't even get enough cases to warrant doing the phaco emulsification, not making much difference. But what it did was that because I was doing corneal transplant, so I was involved in the Hong Kong Eye Bank, and that was where I met people like Dr. Patrick Tong and Hui Xiuping, who accepted me, and that was how I got integrated into the Hong Kong community, and later on in the Ophthalmological Society and so forth. So it's a good community, local community fellowship in those situations. Now, the next impact in development, of course, was a planned extra cap. You guys don't even do that anymore, but that was a big thing because you had posterior chamber lens, but it was a new technique for me. I could do phaco, but not planned extra cap. So where do doctors learn that technique? Well, for me, I had to travel across back to UCLA to my attending physicians. But here's a kick. Now, you have to do it on your own without supervision when you come back. So that was a learning, self-learning curve process. And you have to learn how to take care of complications. So it's a learning curve. It's not a very good experience. Now, which means that, what does it mean? It means that as one person without a platform for public education, without having your fellow colleagues doing what you're doing, it's hard to make a difference. That's my point. And this is how Professor Guy Chan came and make a difference. He was my idol even when I was doing training in the States, because I used to attend the annual American Academy meetings, and we had a Chinese Ophthalmological Society, CHAOS, Chinese American Ophthalmology Society. They were in high standing because at the time, remember in the 1960s, 1970s, there were only 4 ethnic Chinese professors holding the department chairmanship. So Professor Guy Chen was one, Professor Mark Cho was another one. So they were really our idols. So we were very happy when he came back to Hong Kong. So when Professor Mark Cho took over the department chairman, he brought along 5 guys from the US to start that department. So Professor Kai Chen was one, and Dr. Zheng Wu there was one of the people he brought over. Dr. Vincent Li was another one. The other 2 didn't survive very much. So anyway, but however, even though I've been doing phaco emulsification sort of piecemeal for 10 years, but it was Professor Guy Chan who introduced phaco as a new era in cataract surgery at that time. As new. Now, I did the light surgery at that symposium, and he had presented he had presented his series of cases. So he had, in that symposium, he was promoting thickness emulsification intraocular lens implant, and his first series of 100 cases by the residents was pretty good. But there were criticism from some of the distinguished professors from Asia about, well, there's some complication rates were still there, about the cost effectiveness of thick emulsification. And of course, you're challenging the gold standard of a planned extra cap surgery. So it made sort of an impact, but not that much. And the following year, of course, in our annual symposium, Professor Kai Chen then came up with a second series where he started to use the wet lab to train the doctors. And he also showed after the initial learning curve, the results were a lot better. But, you know, the rest is history. So making an impact needs a platform and some dedication. So after the initial criticism, he came back and still persisted, but improved his results. Then the following year, he came to me and told me, hey, there's this remarkable surgical technique that I just found out from my friend. It's absolutely amazing. And he wanted me to go with him to see that. Why? Because even though he knew about that, he thought this was a technique that he could share with the doctors. But at that time, being at the university, he wasn't allowed, well, they didn't think it was appropriate for a non-corneal surgeon to be doing LASIK surgery. And that's why he came to me to see what I thought, to support him. But he wanted to make this into a procedure that could share with other doctors. So I went along with Patrick Tong. John at that time was involved in the States and the academy, so he went to take another course earlier. Now, the surgery was done at Bogota, Colombia. That's drug country, you know. So the doctor, Dr. Luis Ruiz, he actually lived in the States. But he had a private plane that he would fly over to Bogota every Friday and leave Sunday night. In 2 days, he would do 150 cases, 150 cases. And there were patients, not just from Colombia, but from all over, including the States. So at the end of our trip with him, on the way back, actually, I had, there was a patient there was a doctor from the States, and we were sharing the same ride, and we said, wow, this is amazing, reading license plate numbers as we went along. As you notice, we didn't just go to Bogota. Our first stop was to Arizona, where the Dr. K-Spear, one of the leading pioneers of refractive surgery in the States was. So rather than just going to Bogota with Dr. Lewis, we stopped by Arizona to meet with this surgeon who didn't do a lot of LASIK at the time because it was not quite approved, but he was a known refractive surgery surgeon. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing proper procedure in refractive surgery. Well, I couldn't convince my father to buy the LASIK machine, but that's the advantage of Professor Guy Chan because he had credibility. So the professor has credibility to get donors. So, so we got a donor. So the hospital just made the space available for us to start this. So it was all about design, the lab. Then we were ready. Professor Guy Chan, he was still at the university then, and he started to teach us, you see. He got Dr. Caspear to come over, and this time he would use a wet lab, some teaching, working out. You see Patrick Tong here doing his share with the eye to make sure everything was in place. That's learning new technique. So this was our first day before our first patient. And that is actually my brother. He was my 6th patient. He had confidence because we had Dr. Caspear and Dr. Kai Chan, you see. Now, I'll let you know, my brother represented Hong Kong in the Olympics in trap shooting, you know, the target shooting, the trap, clay pigeon shooting in the trap. He didn't do LASIK because he wanted to improve on his trap shooting, but because he wanted to play golf. So Professor Guy Chang, with his first 100 cases of phaco, wanted to do 100 cases in LASIK. So where do you get 100 cases? We asked for volunteers from our nursing staff and anybody in the hospital. But of course, you know, with Dr. John Chang and Patrick Tong, and even professor, they didn't know Professor Guy Chan too well, but professor from the US and myself, we had 100 signed up within 2 weeks. So actually we had to do a number more, but we did the first 100 cases. And Professor Guy Chan had worked with the Hong Kong U Department for the Clinical Trial Center. So we published a paper. Dr. Nick Fong, he was just a college student, but he was interested in ophthalmology. And so actually, he and my son Brian compiled all these statistics and worked with the Hong Kong U professor to get this poster. A lot of interest because we were the first to publish 100 cases, and LASIK was still unknown in the USA. So that was our pioneer. But because of the sharing of the new technology, which the academic structure did not allow at the time, he came out to the Hong Kong Sanatorium to start a new platform. So he started LASIK courses for the eye doctors, didactic lectures, wet lab, supervised cases. And we had trained over 100 doctors, but also from Philippines, US, mainland China, even a doctor from Switzerland. That was a really amazing thing. Look how young I was. But the certificate also came with, you know, the US accreditation for refractive surgery. So it means that Professor Guy Chan felt you need to have proper accreditation, somebody to make sure we are getting the proper safety protocols in place. We make sure that we get this reviewed every couple of years and train a group of other doctors, local doctors, the same technology. And because the LASIK, he taught me a lot. He was the one who came up with patient education, but having a standardized informed consent, a platform for the public to ask questions so that they can't say, hey, I don't know about this, or you haven't told me this. Clinical audits. Now, here's the thing. This is how we do it together. We could share the learning curve so that we could review the complications, we taped the cases, and we went over. So instead of doing it alone, we were sharing the learning curve to get us better. And then, because of all the elective surgery, he wanted the patient survey. When you think about it, if we are patient-oriented, we should always try to get the patient's response. So that's how we started, by asking the patients for the survey. And it actually, a couple of years later, we started, about Sanatorium, started our own patient survey. And the past few years, we actually worked with Hong Kong University to help us with the survey and survey analysis. And then later on, we are asking our nursing students as a training for them to have the first time to be meeting the patients, get the patient's experience, and to talk to them. So this is very good process. But the passion of Professor Guy Chan was in medical students. So when he joined us, he said, can I teach medical students? So just so happened at that time that Professor S.B. Chow, who was the Dean of Hong Kong School of Medicine at the time, was thinking, why can't the medical students get some exposure to the private sector as well? We have a lot of teachers. And so we had a sure winner. The students love Professor Guy Chan. We started this medical student teaching, got good reviews, and actually it became part of the Hong Kong U medical student training program, which means that the students do rotate to Hong Kong Sanatorium as part of the curriculum. We started with Chinese University, not as fixed. Now we started, actually, Professor Guy Chan wanted to do the training program. But because of the success, we started with family medicine. As a matter of fact, general surgery was first because of Professor John Wong, who thought there was a lot of potential of the top surgeons in the Hong Kong Sanatorium to benefit the residents. But we couldn't get together for ophthalmology to get accredited until 5 years later. Why? Because some of the college counselor, even though I was there, was uncomfortable. But we finally got it through. Then followed by orthopedics and plastic reconstructive. Why don't we start more? Well, number one, it costs money. You have to, the HA, we have to pay the full salary, the MPS upgrade. So actually it's a lot of money. Who has the money? HA actually has training funds, except they don't want to pay us. Now, but this is something that we need to work on because there are other places, you know. Do you have training program at Glen Eagle? Because they don't want to pay, so you can't get it. What about the CU hospital? What about the other eye clinics, there are more than enough clinics and people willing to be doing this teaching, except without the platform of our foundation, it's very hard to fork out this money for this training program. But that's something that we can work on. And because of that, it started our collaboration with the university. You know, when things were working well, we do donate a lot of money for Hong Kong U. It started with Professor S.P. Li Samping. And then now with the Gabriel Leung, so we donated the Dean's Fund to the various departments, medicine and surgery. We have a few chair professors in surgery, orthopedics, obstetrics and gynecology and so forth. And then of course we have the list of endowed professorship. We're proud to have Professor Lam as one of our leadership and professorships. We donated some to Chinese Shu, so I'm not totally biased, and even one to UCLA. Unfortunately, we wanted to get a new refractive surgery center, start the preparation. But Professor Chan didn't make it to see this opening, so his wife Nuna was there. Dr. Case was there to honor our opening of the Guy Chan Refractive Surgery Center. And that's what Professor Guy Chan told us. There's a famous 3 T's: teaching, teamwork, and trust. You got people to work together. First, you got to teach them. Then you got to assign the teamwork. And finally, you've got to trust. The hardest to build the 3 T is a trust. So we use it, apply it to a hospital as well. So actually, our staff have quarterly 3 T meetings to build up team spirit and teamwork. There is actually a Hong Kong U academic unit in a hospital. Medical, the surgical cases, orthopedics cases can go there, and the residents have full access to all the patients admitted to the academic unit as part of the teaching program. And so the collaboration with the Hong Kong U surgery not only included the professorial exchange and sessions, also the conferences, academic conferences, and participation at the M&M, mortality and morbidity meetings. So a lot of input in working together, and not just with the Hong Kong Center. Well, the M&M has to be sort of private because everybody know who was involved, and that's a better, but there you have it, still part of it. Now let's go back towards the end. Now we're facing this new world order. What I've shown you, or relate to you and share with you, are the history of people trying to make a change. At the same time, we know that if we want to get better, how do we move? So let's see, we were on the world stage once. How can we maintain there? And what got us there in the first place? How do we get there? I'm not saying we have to get on the world stage, but being recognized on the world stage means that we have done something right. And that's a good path for us to take together. All right. All this you know, but what's really important, it took a hell of a lot of money. The government really poured money to that infrastructure. I'm not sure we will have all that money again. But We built the infrastructure. It's a shame if we don't make use of that. All the new technology, new facility, everything. But when the money dries out, the new stuff becomes older. But it doesn't mean that we have to be totally dependent on the HA or the government, because the private can also acquire advanced equipment that we can share and work together. To move us forward, as I said, you need leadership. Patrick Ho started the department. Professor Mark Cho brought in the outside help. And of course, Professor Dennis Lam took it to new heights. And many of our doctors were trained under Professor Lam. What about the succession? Well, I'm not as dynamic as my uncle. I'm not even as dynamic as my father. He valued and treasured our staff, and he was loved by our staff. So when I took over, I did not know how to transfer the staff loyalty to me. How can I earn? How can I do this? Well, but you know, the way to do it is I can't do it alone. So I have 10 other medical superintendents to do it. And 4 of them were Hong Kong U professors. You don't necessarily need one person, but you can have a team of person to do it together. As I said, in Professor Guy Chan's Memorial Service, I can't replace Professor Guy Chan, but I have you guys here. Guys shall work with them to further his ideals. And that's how our department thrive. We go by his ideals. We do his thing together. What we have here is a situation. A world that is divided, a city that is isolated. In terms of stress, it's a natural instinct to protect our turf, guide our territory, and protect our turf. But when the whole world points at us, this may be the time that we should not stay divided. Maybe this is a time that we can work together to do something together. Not a matter of just private, public, business, practice, university, Chinese university, Hong Kong University. We are part of the same pie, so to speak. So crossing the division is a new concept. And somebody, if willing, would try to remove those partitions, I think. A city isolated, well, it means that you got to reach out. But Zoom meetings, teleconference, anything. It's a new world, and we can find ways to connect up. And if we want to do it together, that's what we can do. What about patient care? Well, tough cases, can we share? Doesn't have to be. Now, if the HA is uncomfortable having the private specialists go over there, well, we can do a lot of remote sharing of cases, remote teaching, video through the operating microscope, public education, the training structure also. in the past few years, a lot of people have come out from the exchange, the public sector into the private sector. And not a lot of interest in subspecialty training or to get, to the top. Well, I know one thing is the fact that we're never going to make a name for ourselves or our international status if all we have produced are cataract surgeons and LASIK surgeons. The subspecialty training is important. How to be, well, you can say, well, I have the division to do cornea or vitreoretina or all this subspecialty. But if there are no senior trainers, who's going to teach? If it's self-taught, you can, but you don't have to be. And that is how this crossing the barrier can help if we do it together. And it's easier because now it doesn't have to be the physical barrier. It's just how we can work together to get the structure together. Research. Sharing of cases. How one center have so many cases? You want to publish papers, you need collaborations. China, international. How do you get international collaboration? Well, this is what my wife teaches me. You used to have to go all over to meet other people, but now you reach them by Zoom. But how do you meet those people? You need the seniors to introduce the younger people, to get them together, you see. This has to be, I think, a process can be done. Why I think we can do it is because of all the years I was involved, the society and the college and the association, private sector. I think, within our eye community, everybody can work together. All these meetings, at least 10 years ago when still there, was always very friendly. We shared this platform, except we didn't talk about politics. But rather than just a platform for private, public, academic, perhaps with leadership, we can create a platform to include a bit of everybody. You see, diversity, new blood. We want to do better. We have a shared vision. The shared vision is just how to make our ophthalmology profession better. How we can exchange knowledge, how we can combine our resources and effort. So it's just a matter of creating a platform, some leadership, and networking. So there are barriers. Can we take off those barriers? Can we get up a platform together? But I know one thing, we can do better together. So what I shared with you are the people I knew, and my own journey to know the limitation of one person and how you need the platform. I also know that amongst the eye doctors, majority are in friendly terms. I played golf tournaments with some of them. We've had functions that we shared very well, but much less, we can do it together, I think. All we need is a structure, some platform that we can work together. And that is important because, for Hong Kong to shine, it's not as if we're going to show ourselves, but at least we should be doing something that could possibly be recognized to make sure that Hong Kong stays on the map, because we have the infrastructure. It's just now, this is a time when we're facing isolation and adversity, is exactly the time that we could learn from what we could, from people who had done it in the past, what we had done it in the past, to be able to do it for the future. So that's my message to you. Thank you.